So when you create a new POW tune, and this is actually going to tie a little bit into the 4Cs discussion we're going to have a little later. They've kind of pre-categorized all of their content into a couple of different looks. Choosing one of these does not limit you. You can choose any of their content at any time, but what it will do is initially sort of filter out so that you're working with content that all design-wise looks like it belongs together. So they have a few that are kind of variations of cartoon looks. There's one that's really geared more towards straight information delivery, and then what they call real. Um, oh, that's all right, Sandy. If you were working from scratch, then you got a chance to work from scratch. So you can check out some of the templates as well. Um, so the reel then is based on actual photographs and things like that. So it's not cartoon at all. It's meant to look as real as possible in terms of the content. So for the sake of this, I'm going to stick with one of the cartoon ones. I'm going to use Modern Edge. By the way, for the video I showed you at the beginning, I used the whiteboard look, which is all outlines. So I'm going to pick Modern Edge as my style. And that will then take us to the studio where we're working. Blank slate. In terms of just general what's on the screen, on the left-hand side, if you've ever worked with oh, now why is it? I'm forgetting what it is now. PowerPoint. There we go. I was thinking Powtoon. PowerPoint. This program is basically slide driven, very much like PowerPoint is. So you create a series of slides that have transitions, and those slides are kept in a drawer on the left-hand side or a column on the left-hand side of the screen. Across the top, you have a few controls. The grid simply gives you a design grid. It doesn't show up in your video. It just gives you something if you're trying to line elements up on a screen. It gives you something to line them up to. The middle gives you a choice of 3 different aspect ratios, basically the geometry of your Powtoon. Horizontal, if you're going to be on a computer screen, square, which is sort of optimized for Facebook or Instagram. And then if you know it's going to be going to mobile devices, there's a vertical. You can also change this at any time. It's not going to move your content. So if you've built something horizontal and you switch to vertical, then things on the sides are going to get chopped off. It's not going to get rid of them. It's just they won't be part of the video. So you might have to move things around, but it doesn't delete anything. So I'm going to keep it on horizontal. And then this is your zoom if you need to zoom in to see something or you want to zoom out. So those 3 controls across the top are just sort of about controlling your screen. All right, so this first group of stuff is what I'm calling what the stuff is. And what the stuff is basically all of the options that are running down the right-hand side of the screen. There's scenes, background, text, characters, props, shapes, media, sound, and specials. So all of these, just think of them as being the things that you can put into a slide. I think some of them are more or less self-explanatory, but they do group them together. So scenes actually, what a scene is it's a collection of things that have already been pre-built. So they give you a bunch of options under industries. So there are some scenes where they've already added in content, props, backgrounds, characters, and that's a way to kind of get started. But anything that is in any of the scenes is also available as individual items. So again, all they're really doing is giving you a jump on putting together a collection of stuff that might go together in a scene. So you can check those out. But again, it's not, by choosing a scene, you're not limiting yourself. You can change anything that's in the scene, delete anything that's in the scene, add anything to the scene. If you're working on your own project, you actually have the ability also to save your own scenes. So if you've built a look on a slide and you want to use that same collection of things in multiple slides or in multiple Powtoons, you can save your own scenes and then come back to those and use them just like you would any of the scenes that that Powtoon has built. And those show up at the top. If you've built a scene, you can save it, and then it'll show up under My Scenes if you've got any. Okay, so that's scenes. The rest of it are all about individual items. Background, this is what goes in the back of the slide. Pretty self-explanatory. You've got, again, a bunch of choices. Some of them are video, so they will actually move. Some of them are just colors. There's a whole category for colored backgrounds, all different types and styles. I guess I'm feeling kind of purplish tonight. So if you find a background that you like, it's just a matter of clicking on it. It will add it into the slide. So anything that shows up in this background category are things that will go in behind everything else that's on that slide. So there's only a limited number of things you can do to backgrounds. For any of the items, when you've selected an item, you'll get a couple of buttons that'll pop up. And one of them is going to be the settings for each of them. So when you've got a background, there's only a certain number of things that you can do to change that background. And some of these options will appear or disappear. If you've got a video, the start time option will be there. If you've thrown an image in there, you'll have some image editing things. So some of these will appear at times and some of them will be grayed out depending on what you've selected for your background. But these will give you the option of changing things on the background that you've selected. Every item will have the swap option. And what swap does is say, I want to change this out for a different one of these things. So rather than having to select something, delete it, find the new thing, put the new thing in, for any item, a prop, a person, a character, a text, then all of those will have the swap feature. So I just saw the question. So yeah, what is, in terms of what you have available to you, because of the account that I have, because you guys are all here in my class, you should have access to everything that is in Powtoon. I actually went ahead and upgraded my account. They have sort of 3 levels. There's a free level, there's a pro level, and there's a pro plus. So because I have the Pro Plus level, you guys should have the ability to use any content that Powtoon has available. There shouldn't be any limitations. If you run into anything and there's something that says you can't use it, let me know, because my understanding is that you guys should be able to use everything. All right. Okay, so back to the backgrounds. Yep, no problem, Sarah. So you can swap anything out. Flipping's not going to do a lot on this background, but it reverses it left to right. And that is also going to be the case for any object that has a symmetry to it. So if you put a character in there and they're facing the wrong way, you can always flip. And then the other options are just about sort of customizing this. Color, you can actually change the color range. Opacity is simply how see-through is the object. With backgrounds, generally the backgrounds stay pretty opaque, but once you start putting things on top, you might want to have a situation where you see something through something else, in which case you could change the opacity. So, but this model of putting a thing in and then having a series of settings for that thing is basically the way that all of the content works, with the exception of sound. Sound is kind of its own little category. But the rest of these are going to start to look like a lot of repetition and a lot of similarity. So for example, if we move down to the text category, they've got, again, a bunch of different categories of kind of types of texts. You can go into text elements, which gives you thought bubbles or speech bubbles and bulleted lists and things like that. So I could select one of these. It's going to put it out on the screen. And if I click on the text, then I've now got that. And then once it's there, I can move it around. Now for these, actually what's happened here, these text bubbles, these text elements, there's actually two items it added. One of them is the text, and one of them is the bubble. So you can actually edit the two of those individually in terms of where they are and what they do. So for text, here's our gear again. And when you open that up, you've got a choice of different fonts. You've got size, bold, italic, underline, sort of all of the basic text functions. Color of the text, again, the opacity. We're going to come back to effects and A to B in the second part of tonight, or the third part of tonight. So I'm going to leave those alone for now. Arranging is just about what is on top of whatever else. If things are covering each other up, with arranging, you can move things backward. You can move them all the way to the back. You can move them forward. You can move them all, or forward. You can move them all the way to the front. So if you've got multiple items, you want some of them to be on top of others. So that's what the arranging does. Okay, but in terms of text, again, it's a thing, it's a stuff. So you put the stuff in, and then you make adjustments to the stuff to make it look the way you want it to. You can resize objects by grabbing their edges, and you can rotate objects by grabbing the little rotation handle. And that's going to be true of most things. This is actually a shape. So it's got some things. I can swap it out. We'll talk about animation later on, but I could flip it left to right. I can change its color, its opacity, the arrangement. I can even add a hyperlink. So if you want to have something on your screen be clickable, you can add that to any object as well. All right. Am I going too fast? What are questions? Yes, please ask, Melissa. Mm-hmm. Yes, that is correct. That is the way that Powtoon is decided to function. You know, any one of these companies making this software has to figure out where they want to draw their line between how much customizing and functioning do they want to give, balanced off against how complicated do they want to make things. So yes, what you discovered is absolutely true, and that's a good thing to point out, that in a single text item, the formatting is going to be the same for that entire text item. Now, the solution, the workaround for what you were talking about is to have multiple text items. So I could go in, and you can also copy and paste items. So I now have two And what I might do here is make this one different. Put a little more space in there. And do something like that. It's not, I'm not saying that's ideal. I think it would be nice to be able to do formatting within a text box. But that at least is a way to get around that. I had that actually in the video I showed you at the beginning of our inspirations. The one that had the present that started at the bottom of the screen, and then halfway through the slide, the present started moving off the screen. With the way this program works, movements like that have to start when the item appears. So the only way I could get it to have the item be there and then start moving was to actually have two items that were in the same location, and one of them didn't appear until halfway through the slide and the other one disappeared. So sometimes you just have to create multiples in order to pull something like that off. But it is possible. It just takes a little additional work in terms of getting everything put together. All right. Any other questions so far? That was a great question. Okay, so moving down the categories, I mean, again, a lot of these are going to start to look similar. I'm actually going to skip characters for just a moment because they're a little bit different. You go to props, it's going to look very similar. There's a bunch of categories, office, business, transport, everyday. You can go into a particular category, and maybe I'm thinking about doing the laundry. So I click on a washing machine, the item's out here. I then can resize it. I can spin it. And then the item similarly has its little submenu. I could swap it out with something else if I don't like the washing machine. I can flip it left to right, how opaque it is. I can change its arrangement top to bottom. Can add a hyperlink to it. So a lot of the same options again. And that's, one of the nice things about this program is they have tried to make everything as similar as possible, so that if you kind of figure out how one thing works, most of the things will work in that same way. So you can drag things around. Shapes, nothing really new here. There are different types of shapes you can add in, basic shapes. Oh, look, it's Pac-Man. So I put in Pac-Man. I don't like the color. Change the color, make it look a little bit more like Pac-Man by rotating it. Maybe I want it to eat the washing machine, so I'll spin it facing the other way. But again, the same types of options here. Now, some shapes are going to offer you a couple of variations. In this case, they give you one option that's filled, one that's just the outline of the shape, and then one where the fill of the shape is transparent, so you can see through it. So that's another option that you may see on some items, is where they'll give you different variations of that same thing. But again, here's our flip, our color, the opacity, and so on. Media. There are two categories in media. One is images and one is video. The images are going to function the same way as all these other things we've been dropping in there. So if I grab these kids, they're going to show up there, but it's just another image that I can resize and spin and shape. In this case, you can crop it. If it's a video, the videos act like the backgrounds. So if you add a video into a slide, it's going to replace whatever you've chosen for your background, and it's just going to sit in the background. So you don't have the ability of dropping a video in and then resizing it or spinning it or things like that. They treat videos they treat videos a little differently than they do the image stuff. Did someone have a question, or that was just somebody signing back in? All right, I guess we're good. So that's that category. Media. Sound, we're not even going to talk about sound this week. That'll be for down the road because that gets into doing voiceover recordings. The last category at the bottom is specials. And these are just where they've grouped together a bunch of content based on a theme. So this particular theme is family holidays, and they just give you a bunch of stuff that somehow relates to family holidays. I'm not quite sure what the dog has to do with family holiday. Not that they aren't fun to have on holiday, but and then there's different categories. Winter holidays. So if we need some snow, we could probably find some snow in here, some images, and so on. There's a snowflake. Oh, we just got the word. We're going to open 90 minutes late tomorrow. Woohoo! So there's our little snowflake going. All right, so really the last item here in terms of stuff are characters. And the only reason I save characters till last is because they are a little more fully developed than, I'm just moving all this stuff out of the way, a little more fully developed than just simple items. The categories that you'll be shown are the ones that line up with whatever look you chose. However, you do have the option at the bottom to choose another look. Or if you've added a character, when you go to swap it out, it will let you choose from the other looks as well. So if you don't like these characters and you want to add one in from one of the other collections, you can. So let's go with the Dream Team here. So when you pull open a category, they're going to give you a whole bunch of different variations of those characters. And for each character, there's going to be moods. And they generally have about 7 moods, 6 or 7 moods, depending on who the characters are. And the mood basically is just what sets the facial expression of the character. If the character is going to move, then their mood will determine how they move. They have sort of a fixed animation loop that they will do. So maybe this character is angry. So I click on angry, and now I've got an angry character, and you can see she kind of stomps and does whatever. So that's getting a character in there. If you don't like the mood or you pick the wrong mood, that's actually the pose. So maybe she's not angry. Maybe she figured out what was wrong, and now she's all fine and is just waving hello. So that's one of the main settings that only appears with the characters, is what their pose is. Again, we'll talk about the animation and the effects and the A to B later on, but we can flip the character. We can swap them out with a different character, and so on. So that's basically how the characters work in terms of getting them in there. One thing I should point out, and this especially comes up with characters, but sometimes with the props too, you can size items so that they're bigger than your Powtoon. So if you really want to get a close-up of a character's face, you just have to make them big, and you can drag the rest of the character out of the frame and just take a look at the bit of the character that's there. All right, so with the exception of sound, what we've just looked at there is basically all of the things that you have available to put in. Down the road a little, we will look at if you want to add your own images. If you have a very specific image that you want to bring in, you can do that. We'll look at that at the same time that we look at bringing sounds in, because they kind of are similar to each other. So you can add your own content in if you've got something specific you want to use. But in terms of what they provide, and again, the video I did at the beginning of the class was all from stuff that was just stock right out of their libraries. That gives us all of that content. So, questions? This is where I miss Dr. Sponder and say, I need 2 questions. Yes, go ahead. Yes. Yes. Yeah, if you like, for example, if you have Pro but not Pro Plus, they'll, because of course they want you to upgrade, they will show you in the menus, they'll show you the options, but they'll have a little plus on top of them, meaning um it's what's possible is I didn't do the full upgrade until sometime in the middle of the week. So it's possible you might have been in there prior to when I did that upgrade. So when we logged on last week, I was at the Pro level, but not the Pro Plus. So it is possible, depending on when you logged in over the course of the past week, that might have changed since then. But my understanding now is you should have access to everything. You're welcome. All right. Yes, Tom. In terms of like previewing the video. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. I ran into that in some cases in building a slide. I would have, even when I would preview the slide, have items show up in places that they weren't supposed to be and then disappear and then show up somewhere else. Um, I have a feeling that part of that may be simply the fact that it's working through a web interface, which is never going to be as powerful, computing wise. Everything that you're doing is having to be fed over the internet and then back to you. So especially if it's content that you uploaded yourself, that's not coming right from their libraries, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some of that. What I did discover is that when you finally do an actual export, that all of that does go away. Everything smooths out because at that point it can take all the time it needs to assemble everything. But in some aspects, it's actually sort of remarkable that things like this are able to be done over the internet and not with an app that's actually on your computer. Not that long ago, this would have been inconceivable to be able to do anything that has motion and video and all of that simply through a web interface. So, sure. Yeah, yeah, and it's we're going to run into issues like that, and that I still, if I have a preference, especially because most of what I do is audio production. There are now tools online that let me do certain things online. But like you said, if I have the option, if I've got a piece of software that's actually on my computer, it's always my first choice to go with that because it's they're gonna function more smoothly. So I don't know the what was the other app? Was that Tanya? Were you talking about the other app? Animoto, right. Did you, I don't know if you played around with that enough to see if there were, yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I have to check that out, um, just to see, um, but that's good to know that working with original content on this has that issue. So I'll do a little research and see if I can find out anything about that, but I'll also have to check out Animoto. All right. So my thought was, especially because now we've been staring at these screens for an hour, is what I'll do is this is we'll take a half an hour. So say six, call it 32 minutes, 6:35, let's say. And so during that time, feel free to take a little break and get a drink and whatever else. But then use the remainder of that time just to go into Powtoon, um, and really just kind of explore what we've looked at here. And I know some of you have some experience with this already, so a lot of this may be familiar. But again, I wanted to break it down to really kind of focus just on this is the stuff you can put in. We haven't really talked about how to make the stuff do anything. That'll come next. Um, and then we'll go from there. So we'll be back at 6:35. I'm going to keep the room open. You don't have to log out of the room, but I'll keep the room open and I'll stay around. So if you have questions, feel free to chime in and ask if you run into something. But other than that, just try some things out and see what you can put together. And I'll see folks back here around 6:35. All right. All right. We'll see you in a bit.